What is up, guys? Welcome back to another GeekaWhat video. In this one, I'm going to be building the ultimate small form factor gaming PC for 2023 and beyond. This is a build that means business with a top-of-the-line Ryzen 7000 processor, RTX 4000 series graphics, and components that will make your eyes water and, to be fair, your bank account bleed. I'll walk you through the parts that make this build possible, how to put together an awesome small form factor PC like this one, and of course performance a little bit later. Let's do this. First things first, I'm going to walk through the parts I chose and why, starting with this, the Fractal Torrent Nano computer case. It's my latest Amazon purchase, so I'll leave a link to it down below. And after seeing it in action in a few other builds, I thought it had great potential for this system. It's not the smallest mini ITX case on the market, but it's feature-packed and is great for large graphics cards like this one. Talking of which, this is a Founders Edition RTX 4080, but I'm actually, as the video progresses, going to swap this out with a Founders Edition 4090. The reason it's not here, by the way, is because I left it at home in my new personal setup, the video of which you might have seen. If not, check out in the cards. It's a very good one. 4080 or 4090 though are both going to work very well. You've of course got top-of-the-line specs with loads of video memory, RT cores, Tensor cores, DLSS 3, and even if you don't give a monkeys about any of Nvidia's latest fancy features, still the fastest gaming graphics card on the market in terms of the 4090. CPU-wise, I am going Ryzen. I'll give you a couple of reasons for that in a moment, and I've picked up the 7950X. I'm waiting on their new 7950X3D, so that could also be worth considering, but for now, the 7950X is going to do. Ryzen 7000 has had some challenges, but they're still great CPUs in many respects, and they've come on a long way since launch. The X3D chips, of course, give you that new and improved cache, which will give you a bit more frame rate and a bit more gaming performance. The whole build will be built on to the motherboard, of course, from Asus. This is the ROG STRIX X670E gaming Wi-Fi. Now, this one's got a few fancy features, but Asus have been really on it when it comes to mini ITX boards in recent years. With this huge stack under the PCI lane, you've got loads of connectivity, loads of expandability, and I'll run you through the nitty-gritty details of it a bit later. All you need to know for now, though, is that this is a great choice. RAM and storage will be provided by a couple of my favorites. I've got Corsair Expo kit. Expo is like AMD's kind of new XMP profile technology. Bit confusing, but this is good for Ryzen 7000. Low latency, 6000 megahertz in terms of the speed, so nice and fast, and it's going to do the job nice. It looks good. I like it. Corsair, this memory is a vibe. Storage-wise, Samsung 990 SSD Pro. This is a 2TB drive, read and writes in the region of about 7.5 gigabytes a second. Very solid drive, great endurance ratings, great speed, and not too expensive compared to some of the alternate competition. The whole build will be powered by Corsair's HX1000i. If you're opting for the slightly weaker 4080, the RM850X will be totally fine, but the HX1000i is going to give us a bit more wattage for those top-end 4090 builds, and of course overclocking the very power-hungry and quite warm-running Ryzen 7950X. I've also picked up a couple of other bits and bobs, cooling in the form of Deepcool's LS520. The 240mm is the max we can pop in this case, at least in the front of the chassis, so this pushes the limits, and it's a really great cooler. I love the water block design, I love its installation method, and I love the performance you get. Deepcool are really great when it comes to coolers. Final few bits of accessories for a bit more wow factor. I've got this EZDIYFab right angle 24-pin motherboard power cable. Basically, this is going to help with cable management in a small case. I've also picked up these custom sleeved cable extensions from EZDIYFab. These particular ones are of a dark grey and black variety. I suppose one other thing I've also bought from Corsair's web store, link below again, is a PCI Gen 5 Type 4 power connector. Basically, it takes the PCI connections from the power supply and turns them into the super small Gen 5 cable, perfect for cable management and making, of course, our 40 series GPU look that bit more stellar. Otherwise, though, I think we're ready to build a gaming PC. So let's get the Torrent Nano out of its bloody box and let's build this system once and for all. I am very excited. I want to take a second to compliment Fractal on the really sick rebrand and internal packaging, and also the fact they give you the accessory box right at the top in the front of the case. There's no hunting around to try and find it. I like it when brands make things easy. Although I will say this is not the cheapest mini ITX case out there, so you'd kind of hope it's included. Very lightweight is my first impressions. I know it sounds really stupid because this is a small form factor build, but you kind of forget how small these things really are sometimes. Let's take a tour around, shall we, the Nano. So at the front, it's got a 180mm fan, tempered glass side panel here. On the I/O, we've got a power button front and center, 2 USB 3.0 ports, headphone mic, USB-C, and your reset. I'm not sure. Are these toolless? Yes, they are. Well, at least the glass one is. The rear panel is also looking pretty toolless, so let's pull that one off. Oh, that's glass as well. Very nice. There are a few different variants of this case available, so you can get like a more sleek one, a white one, a black one, or one with RGB, and that's black, which is what I've gone for in this build. So yeah, first impressions, very nice indeed. Important things to note in terms of ITX cases, it does actually fit a full-size ATX power supply, so I'm going to give that a go. I have got some SFX units, so if it's a bit tight up there, we can swap it out. And in terms of the PCI lanes at the back, if you take a look just here, we've got 3, so that's going to fit triple slot cards with a bit of mesh on the bottom. So unfortunately, there's no clearance for us to add any fans in with those big graphics cards, but it can still access air from under the case, and the GPU can still pull in that fresh air from underneath. Founder's card's going to be great with the fan on the top, because then you're not just relying on the bottom for airflow. I'm going to recommend what I always recommend when it comes to building a PC, and that's to take off all the panels. I'll leave the bottom ones on, but this top one should certainly come off. Quite how, I'm not actually sure, so let's figure that out. Pull it back, lift it off, and inside there, this is clever. There's a drive bay for 3.5 or 2.5 inch hard drive SSD, and also a little accessories box. Very, very nice to see indeed. I like that a lot. I think what I'm going to do next is actually go ahead and pop as much as I can onto the motherboard and get the motherboard in, and then I can start thinking about my other components afterwards. This has to be one of the biggest mini ITX motherboard boxes ever, so let's find out why, shall we? Motherboard is first. Looks pretty good. See what I mean about all that connectivity? There's loads of M.2 drives all in this gap just here. I/O's also pretty solid. A bit of a fan as well that disperses some air out the rear I/O. 40 gigabit Thunderbolt 4 port, mini display port, only 2.5 gig Ethernet, but we do get Wi-Fi 6. Now, otherwise, inside, there's a few other bits and bobs. So there's our sort of regular accessories in here, which is like Wi-Fi and key rings and USB cables, apparently. And then, over on the other side, there is a ROG FPS 2 card. What does this do? Give me like another 30 frames per second for free, or what kind of trickery are Asus doing? So yeah, So basically, this plugs into the motherboard and gives you a few more ports. It gives you more USB headers, a couple more SATA ports, all that kind of stuff. Pretty useful. I wouldn't call it the FPS card though, that's a bit weird. And then, also in here is something called the Asus ROG STRIX Hive, which is wrapped inside of an anti-static bag, and is basically an external audio DAC. So you've got a couple of USB ports, one of which you can use for like BIOS updates. You've got headphone and mic jacks for an external audio. There's a few lights on here, different effects you can tune and adjust, and then also a volume wheel. So this is very nice to have on the top of a desk, and also, of course, allows Asus to cram more features onto this board without needing more space, and avoiding, of course, the constraints of the mini ITX form factor. So that is mighty fine. So let me package this all away and move things along with our build by adding the CPU into the motherboard. Now, of course, this is one of the first things that you want to do in any build, and be easily installed once I've managed to get it out of the box by just lining up one triangle with another and popping it in. Of course, new Ryzen chips have pins on the motherboard rather than pins on the CPU. That's good and bad. It makes the CPUs themselves less delicate, but the motherboard's a bit more delicate. RAM is going to be next up. The Expo kit is very easy to install on this build in particular because there are only 2 actual slots. So there's only 2 places where the 2 DIMMs can actually go. So both those slots are going to go back, and then the RAM slides in nice and easily. So DIMM number 1, and then of course DIMM numero 2. SSD is going to be next. Samsung's SSD 990 Pro. I need to take off the very top M.2 heatsink with a small screwdriver, often referred to on the channel as a teeny tiny screwdriver, before placing the drive in and popping the heatsink back on. This will help to keep the drive cool, which is important as these drives can run hotter than older historical M.2s.
The SSD looks a little bit curved.
Oh, it does, doesn't it? Oh, that M.2 drive does not look right at all, does it? Great spot. What the hell has happened there? Is it stayed bent or is it okay? No, it's fine there. No, that's okay there. Next up, I think I want to prep some of the cooler installation now before moving the motherboard into the case and making things more complicated. But I don't actually know yet how this cooler installs. So I'm going to take it out the box, have a quick peek at the instructions and see if I can figure it out. So my research mission has been successful and I've concluded I need to do a few things. The first of which is take this bag. Now this bag here contains all the things we'll need for an AMD based install. So we've got the screws and stoppers for the motherboard and the frame for the cooler itself. Now what you need to do is first of all remove these two plastic brackets around the CPU. So we're going to take off the top one first. Do keep this safe, because if you decide to upgrade later, say to a more beefy cooler, it might not use these brackets, but it also similarly might use the brackets, and it's good to have that insurance policy. Or alternatively, if you ever decided you wanted to sell the motherboard, having those available for the person who buys it off you can be pretty useful. The rest of the cooler installation can wait. I might just add these AMD brackets onto the bottom of the water block and the pump area now, just to save a job later. But otherwise, I think we're ready to finally move the motherboard into the case. At least we know that is all going to fit A-OK before moving on to get the power supply in and finishing things off with the GPU. How very, very exciting. Here we go. Now, with it being an RTX case, shouldn't have too many compatibility issues getting it in terms of an RTX board. All the screws will be in the right place, and hopefully, if I line up the I/O shield at the back, the rest of it should just follow nicely, he says, as he drops the motherboard. There is a raised standoff which should hold the motherboard in, but it's in the bottom right, which makes sense, but it's just trying to get it lined up. There we are. I think we're all good. Motherboard screws. And of course, we just need to put one in each corner. I might start with the one on the bottom right, just to brace the whole motherboard a bit more firmly into place, tightening them up corner by corner until the whole motherboard is in and nice and secure. So, progress is being made. I think next up, I'm going to go for the boring part, the power supply, just to get it in. I'm expecting most of you guys will know how to install a power supply, so I won't go over too many details with this, but I'm just hoping that Corsair's HX1000i fits okay, and of course that I can get all the cables run to the right locations. So I think this should fit. Right. So the good news is, although it's resting, it'll obviously be slightly elevated. It does fit. However, we're not going to have the clearance that I thought we were going to have for the liquid cooler, for our deep cool 240mm. But we might have enough clearance for something like this. This is a dual, it's also from deep cool. It's a dual tower air cooler. Now, an air cooler is not quite as ideal. However, it's still, in my view, a better option than going for a 120mm liquid cooler, personally speaking. This one isn't too tall either, so it might well just be about to save the day. I think that might work. It actually fits. Okay, all right. I'm going to breathe. I'm going to relax. I'm going to go ahead and pop the graphics card in first. Of course, 4080 and 4090 founders are exactly the same size. Get all that screwed into the triple slots, and then I'll be back with you to try and figure out this damn cooler situation. When it's tight, ow, there we go. Bit of a click, couple of screws, and I think we'll be fine. Okay, so graphics card's in. Next up, I'm going to try and swap the cooler over, and I'll be back with you to let you know whether I've succeeded or indeed failed. Hopefully, the former of the two. Oh, it fits, guys, it fits. Does the side panel go on? Of course it does, look at that. Oh, I actually prefer that. I actually think that looks better than what the liquid cooler would have looked like. Oh, it looks sick. I am going to do one thing. I'm going to add an RGB fan at the back and also run the PCI Gen 5 power cable. I think we might not be able to hide it, unfortunately. And then package this build up, boot it up, and check out performance in just a few moments' time. I am very, very excited. Whew, I need to sleep now. Nice. So this build is finally working and looking fantastic in the process. But how well does this small form factor system perform? Well, I've added in the RTX 4090, booted up some of the most popular games in a bid to find out. The first of which is Call of Duty's Warzone 2. At 4K high settings with DLSS enabled and set to performance mode, this build achieved a stellar 147 frames per second on average. A frame rate that is sure to satisfy even the most competitive 4K gamers. Move through into Modern Warfare 2 Remastered, basically the same game architecture design under the hood, and the frame rate does rise a bit, using identical settings, 4K high, DLSS once again at performance, to 181 FPS on average. That's going to be more than enough to satisfy high refresh rate 165Hz 4K gaming monitors, and also of course deliver over 200 FPS if you did drop the resolution down to 1440p. Fortnite at 1080p competitive settings was also a very good show of results. Here, with everything tuned down to low except the render distance, which was set to far, the build pulled in 345 FPS on average. Lovely stuff. Moved back up to 4K in Apex Legends, the next title today, and the build achieved a stunning 176 FPS with strong 90 and 99th percentile results to boot. As ever, all of the frame rate data was captured using both MSI Afterburner's Riva Tuner and Nvidia FrameView. Overwatch 2 was also a good show in 4K Ultra in this title, delivered more than 250 frames per second on on average. Well, to wrap up the testing, we also booted up a little bit of Formula 1 2022 to put DLSS 3.0 through its paces. Here at 4K, using the ultra high preset with DLSS 3 enabled and ray tracing turned to high, the build pulled in an amazing 194 FPS on average at 4K. The 4090 is a stunning GPU that certainly doesn't lack any power, if of course you've got a case large enough and a wallet deep enough to stomach its huge price tag. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to drop a like rating. Thanks for watching, and as always, we'll see you in the next one, or at least I hope we will.